On August 16th, Fortinet's FortiGuard Labs released its latest global threat landscape that looks at how threat actors target vulnerabilities, build malicious infrastructure, and exploit their targets. I'm Wyatt Cash with Scoop News Group, and here to talk to us today about the report's findings is Derek Manky, Chief Security Strategist and Vice President of Global Threat Intelligence at Fortinet's FortiGuard Labs. Derek, thank you so much for joining. And let me start by asking, at a high level, what are the takeaways from this latest report on changes in attack techniques?
Yeah, great question, Wyatt. So with the attack techniques, we're really zooming in and looking at the different tools in the toolkit of not just nation state actors and APTs, but cybercriminals as well. And what was quite interesting to see in the report is that they are building on this. It's an investment strategy on their side. It takes time and money, quite frankly, to develop new weaponized techniques to be able to penetrate systems, evade security controls. We actually show in the report a heat map, which shows the variety of these techniques. So while some of these techniques may have been used 2 or 3 years ago, we're actually seeing a myriad of new techniques being added. This is actually directly related to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. As new versions of the MITRE ATT&CK framework are rolled out, new techniques are supported in that. Why are those supported? Because cybercriminals are creating more techniques. And the report reflects that. We're actually seeing concentrated efforts and activity. And we're not talking about 1, 2, or 3. We're talking about 20 plus different techniques that they're using.
Well, and can you maybe illustrate how adversaries are actually upping their game across the attack chain?
Yeah, so if we look at the attack chain, there's multiple entry points, if you will, into the way that they orchestrate these attacks. For the most notable change that we're seeing and is what I refer to as advanced persistent cybercrime. They're shifting to the left, meaning that they're focusing more on reconnaissance and weaponization. So those techniques that we just discussed, that's part of that weaponization phase. They're creating new methods to be able to evade security controls. That was actually the #1 tactic we saw. 59% of all the effort and time on that attack chain was focused on defense evasion, which is pre-game planning, right? So that's really how they're upping their game, because it's harder traditionally to protect against these because they are more methodical, they're premeditated. As I said, they're adding more techniques to that. And so it's more of a focus on that pre-attack in the attack chain before they actually go to the target. And keep in mind, this used to be in the realm of nation state groups and APT, but what we're seeing now is that this is fully being adopted by cybercrime.
So what would you say the data indicates about particular vulnerability trends and what organizations should prioritize now in their patching strategies to kind of deal with this this kind of shift in an attempt for getting embedded in systems, it sounds like?
Yeah, so vulnerabilities are very key because this is often the entry point into systems. We see this with wiper malware. We call that out in the report. We're seeing more and more adoption of, we actually saw over 24 countries now with this destructive malware detection. So what that means is it's becoming critical to be able to safeguard against these hot vulnerabilities before those are deployed, because it's destructive in nature, very high risk. What we saw in the report is that with the attack surface, we call this the danger zone. We're not talking about 180,000 different vulnerabilities, which, by the way, is how many there are all time to protect against. This is a CISO guide that we've created. It's a correlation of data looking at attack surface, how many unpatched, what are the hot, most widely deployed unpatched vulnerabilities? And what ones of those are attackers going after? And what we saw is that the most widely deployed and active attacks were from 2022, from about May, but there was also a lot of old ones. Why it's still in there too, 2014, 2015, 16. That was surprising to me. Quite frankly, I think that problem is getting worse in terms of the patch discussion that we talk about all the time. but it was reflected in the data.
Interesting. Well, and then finally, Derek, what are some takeaways that CISOs should focus on in terms of next steps to improve their organization's broader security posture?
Yeah, the risk has never been higher because of everything we just talked about. And now we have destructive malware, more targeted ransom attacks. We also have more of this targeted attack nature happening, of course. And so what that means is, first of all, as I say, we don't have to boil the ocean. We can make this simple. Assessments, knowing where your assets are, doing training for employees, so that's part of that attack chain, right? Honing the mindsets, so they're not clicking on phishing links as an example. Patching, absolutely, but focus on these top needle movers for patches, not again looking at where do I begin or start. That's where CISOs should be looking at, is actually guides like we've created in the threat landscape report, making sure that you have those gaps filled. Endpoint security, centralized data access and analysis and response is really key. There's just too many products out there, we know, and being able to have a single pane of glass is very important. ZTNA goes a long way for these rogue threats that are hitting networks. And finally, machine learning, but really security technology that adopts machine learning, interoperates. That attack chain we're talking about is moving quicker. It's hard for humans to keep up because attackers are leveraging machine learning and offensive automation. And so from CISO perspective, you need to be able to guard that with the same technology.
And then perhaps lastly, any additional insights for CISOs that are really managing OT systems versus IT systems?
Yeah, great question. So OT is, we actually had an OT section as well in the report. And what we showed there is that it's not just, again, about a handful of vendors. There were a lot in the scatter chart showing, which is the reality. There's a lot of different vendors deployed in OT networks and a lot of attacks happening against that in OT. We've talked about attacks that affect OT from IT networks before, but what we're seeing is a convergence of the threat landscape, a convergence between IT and OT networks that are directly targeting OT vendors. That's actually a big shift. And so the message to CISOs in the OT space is, well, traditionally they've been involved safeguarding the IT side of the house, i.e., admin systems and so forth that have some connection to OT. Now they really need to look at the OT systems themselves, attacks on those platforms, again, patches, virtual patches, having intrusion prevention, and so forth. But it's, as we showed in the report, there's a big uptick in attacks on OT.
Well, we'll be sure to include a link to that report in the show notes. But in the meantime, Derek Manky, thank you so much, as always, for taking a few minutes to share your latest insights on attack vectors and what CISOs can be doing about them.
Okay, thank you so much.